All right, let's first start with Ohtani. Marketplace is exploding. The report out of Chicago about 2 hours ago, the Cubs are not bringing back Cody Bellinger. The Cubs have a lot of budget space. The Cubs are going to try to make the run at Ohtani. Could you imagine Shohei in Wrigleyville, friendly confines of Wrigley Field? Think a few balls would be flying out with or without the wind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fans there would love that.
Yeah, so I've been told Dodgers, your Giants, Yankees, Cubs. They look like four ready to make a big money deal for Ohtani. What happens with the Japanese pitcher, Yash Yamamoto? Indications are he's dropping hints. I don't know if he's dropping him through his agent or where this is coming from, or dropping it through the media in Tokyo. He wants to play on the West Coast. I would have thought that guy would have wound up with the Mets, with Kota Sengai, who they got last year, or that guy'd wind up with the Yankees. But at this point, it does not appear that that's happening. So you got that situation. If he's going to be West Coast, does that mean Ohtani and Yamamoto, Dodger Stadium? Giants need pitching. Seattle's got space and has a history of dealing with those type of people. Price tag is going to be high. I've not heard the Padres mention at all, which is a little bit surprised because Ha-Seong Kim came from Korea and has a great reputation that he's built on the Pacific Rim. So keep an eye on Yamamoto. I don't understand this Yankee story. Brian Cashman, who put on a really flame-throwing press briefing last week about, I believe in our people, and you don't have a right to criticize us, blah, 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 blah. Yankees were wrecked by injuries. He made a comment about Giancarlo Stanton, and it said, because Stanton had a miserable season, hit 191 with 24 home runs. It was more time on the injured list than he was on the field. He said, well, I expect him to get hurt again because that's who he is. His agent went crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know, Cashman must be losing his mind because the stuff he said last week at the press conference said, I believe in our effing team, even if you don't. He was lecturing the media, and, this is one of the worst records Yankees have had in decades. But why would you make this comment about he's going to get hurt again because that's who he is?
Well, he's not necessarily wrong. It's just the wrong thing to say.
Oh, you think? Reel that one back in. Dodgers, we talked a little bit about this. I think they're going to be active, if not Yamamoto to go with Ohtani, then maybe a trade. I think they're going to look at Corbin Burns. I think they're going to look at the Cleveland pitcher. There's a report that they're closing in on a deal to get Cincinnati second baseman Jonathan India.
Oh, wow.
Cincinnati's got a ton of guys coming, and they're looking for one of the younger pitchers the Dodgers have at AAA, and just a straight-up swap for India. India would solve one of their infield problems there. There's also talk, although I don't quite understand why the Yankees would do this, but the Yankees are shopping Gleyber Torres, second baseman, third baseman, who's really been productive the last couple of years, but they need pitching. So Torres could be available. And in Milwaukee, I'm sorry, I don't understand this hire at all to replace Craig Counsell. They went and got Pat Murphy. Pat Murphy. He'd been a bench coach for Craig Counsell for 8 years, coached him when they were at Notre Dame. Pat Murphy was here. He was the guy that went into the dugout when AJ fired Bud Black. He didn't want to manage. He was the most offbeat, disinterested participant as a major league manager as I've ever seen. I thought he was a lifer coach, and Milwaukee picked him. Milwaukee's obviously blown up their roster. I mean, Burns, Willy Adames, Christian Yelich, those guys are all going to vacate. And they've already lost Brandon Woodruff for next year. So maybe Murphy takes a job because it was about the only guy that wanted to go to Milwaukee. Maybe because he's cheap. But I thought that was a really strange hire. So I said a lot there. You respond to Ohtani and Yamamoto and take it there from the Yankees GM and the Dodgers and the Brewers.
Well, it's natural to assume that these Asian players want to play on the West Coast. I get that because, if they want to go home, it's a lot easier. And there's probably going to be a little bit more culture along the West Coast that they'll be able to integrate in. So I get it. There's a lot of people chirping. Some people are even on the fans forum. Some guys are saying, Ohtani could maybe even stay with the Angels. There's a lot of people that think that could happen. which would be a shocker. But Ohtani to San Francisco makes a lot of sense because they've been trying to get a big man.
And they've tried really hard from Correa going back.
And
the last
Aaron
couple years.
Judge, too.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, he was a NorCal guy. They thought they had a shot. So they're ready to spend money. Yamamoto, to me, is the fascinating pick here. I mean, that would be a perfect one for the Padres to pick up because they've got to get pitching. And he looks so good in the WBC. But the other comment to make is about Pat Murphy. And before he came to San Diego, I think he was the head coach at Arizona State.
And prior to that, Notre Dame.
Right. So he's worked with young kids. And, you know, he's apparently well thought of because I remember when he was the interim coach after Bud Black got fired.
Interim manager. He finished out that season.
Yeah. And then he was on the staff, I think, for Andy Green or something. And the Brewers asked for permission and then they hired him straight away. So there's people that like him, but maybe they think he's a better fit for the young guys. Or maybe they're just cheap. You know, they're going to have a low payroll. They'll pay the manager very little because Counsell got $40 million for 5 years.
Yeah. I was surprised because I thought this was going to be fun. Murphy had done a good job at AAA for the Padres, seemed to be held in regard. And he got in there, and our sessions in the dugout with him, he just seemed so disinterested in talking specifics about baseball. To me, it was just a weird vibe. And this went on and on. Then they brought somebody else in. They brought in one of their executives who would conduct the press briefing, and he would give out information about roster changes and injuries, and he'd answer questions. It was bizarre. And I knew one of the executives who was doing it, and he looked at me at the end of one of these 8 or 10 minute press briefings. And I said to him, you know, you got a good voice. You ought to be on the BBC. I've never seen anything like that. A manager is so disinterested, didn't really want to talk to the media about anything and everything. And managers deal with those guys twice a day in the dugout at 4:15 and after the game, post game. You need to be able to talk specific things. So
it's part of the job.
Maybe I wore the wrong shirt and tie that day. I don't know. It was really strange. Hey, we get to